The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our food banks, that if you put the images in black and white, you would just assume you were looking at images from the Great Depression. We have never seen 2 million people going to a food bank in a month. We never had 7 million people eating less than is healthy. But that is the starvation that we have as a result of 8 years of this Prime Minister. There's a common sense Conservative bill, C-234, that is passed to the Senate. The Prime Minister's ministers are panicking and begging senators to block it. Will the Prime Minister tell his senators that they have go-ahead to pass this common sense Conservative bill so our farmers can feed our people?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You'd think after 2 decades in this place, the member opposite might know that the Senate is independent of this place. However, there was a time when Canadians could look to Conservatives for a little bit of leadership on fighting climate change. Mr. Speaker, Brian Mulroney was a
Please. I had trouble hearing the honourable member, so I'm going to ask the honourable member to start again from the top so that I can hear. Please, honourable members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, you'd think after 2 decades working here, and no other job before that, I might add, that the member opposite, Leader of the Conservative Party, would know that the Senate is independent of this place. And you know, there was also a time, Mr. Speaker, when Canadians could look to the Conservatives for a little bit of leadership on climate action, back when Brian Mulroney led the fight against climate change, and when my neighbour, the member from Wellington Halton Hills, staked his entire leadership campaign on a carbon price. Now the Leader of the Conservative Party is using climate action as a wedge to justify their vote, shameful vote, against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Mr. Speaker, Ukraine already prices carbon, and they're out of air.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the member's comedy routine won't make up for the fact that Canadians cannot afford to feed themselves. But the Prime Minister is in a bind again. He was already bullied by his Atlantic caucus into panicking and bringing in a temporary pause on home heating taxes, but only for some. Now, his Environment Minister is threatening to resign if there are any more carbon tax carve-outs. Will the Prime Minister stop allowing himself to be bullied and threatened by his radical Environment Minister and axe the tax on our farmers so that Canadians can afford to eat?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The only thing radical in this House is the Leader of the Conservatives Party constant climate denial, Mr. Speaker. As I just mentioned, the Conservatives are trying to use climate denial in an attempt to justify their shameful vote against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement yesterday. But I have news for the Conservatives. Ukraine already prices carbon, along with other European countries like Norway, Sweden, Great Britain, Denmark, Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Poland, Switzerland. A lot of them believe in pricing carbon, Mr. Speaker. They all ran on that promise, and the member from Wellington Halton Hills staked his entire leadership campaign on it, Mr. Speaker. Get with the program, Conservatives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Their program is hunger and homelessness for Canadians. Fortunately, we have a common sense Conservative solution which would take the carbon tax off of our farmers. The tax they want to quadruple. But the Prime Minister is in a panic because his Environment Minister says, and I quote, "As long as I am the Environment Minister, there will be no more exemptions to the carbon pricing," end quote. In other words, if this bill passes, his Minister of Environment will resign. Why won't the Prime Minister simply accept the Minister's resignation now and let this bill pass so Canadians can feed themselves?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know what it means when they hear the words common sense Conservatives. It means cuts to the programs and the services that they rely on that ultimately hurt Canadians. But let's put some facts on the table, Mr. Speaker. Since we've come into office in 2015, we've lifted 650,000 children, 2.7 million Canadians out of poverty. Canada now ranks 6th in terms of where we rank in terms of child poverty in the world. When the Conservatives were in office, when that leader was in office, Mr. Speaker, Canada ranked 24th in the world when it came to child poverty. Mr. Speaker, we continue to support Canadians. We'll stay on the facts, and we will not cut services like the Conservatives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, what they're doing is cutting the food budgets of families by raising the tax on the farmers who feed us. Again, there is a common-sense Conservative bill that passed through this House of Commons against the great protest of the Prime Minister, who still wants to quadruple the tax. We're simply asking him to tell his Environment Minister to resign and let his Liberal-appointed ministers pass the bill. So, what will he pick? Will he pick allowing Canadians to feed their families around the kitchen table, or will he keep his crazy Environment Minister around the cabinet table?
Order. I'd like to remind all members that it's important to use language which is, when it's directed at a particular member, language that is not disruptive or demeaning. I will ask the Honourable Minister to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll happily tell the Leader of the Opposition what we pick on this side. Mr. Speaker, we pick to support Canadians in their time of need. Mr. Speaker, we pick to fight climate change, Mr. Speaker, which we know is an existential threat. And we pick to ensure that we are supporting people who are seeking their freedom around the world, Mr. Speaker. What we're seeing in the United States is right-wing politicians who are turning away from Ukraine, turning towards Russia. I can only assume that's what we're seeing here in Canada right now, as the members opposite are the